Let's talk about how to counter an agenda that works in your disadvantage. So there's outside pressure that wants to see either your organization destroyed, could be a competitor. They want to challenge your belief system with their particular plan. No matter what your belief system is, someone is against it. How do you address that? I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, where we talk about social engineering, we talk about challenges with persuasion, and we have to address the factor that not everybody's going to agree with you. You know, whatever you believe is important to you, it's meaningful to you, but there's going to be some detractor out there that is against your objective, and there will be times in your life where it feels like that everything is set up against you. Now, maybe it's because the inflation is bad and the economy is bad and job opportunities have gone away and you maybe got laid off from your business. Maybe you were doing the right thing in your organization, but the organization was benefiting from doing the wrong thing, and you wanted to whistleblow. You wanted to raise a flag, and it just turned out that it wasn't the right thing to do because they let you go. Now, again, we have a high level of ethics here. It's compulsive on my part to have a high level of ethics. It is the right thing to raise the flag and say something. If you have to put in an ethics claim internal, you need to talk to human resources. You need to understand that dynamic. But if that is necessary because something bad is happening and you trust that the company typically fixes that kind of bad thing, there's nothing wrong with that. However, it could have unintended consequences. So how do we address those setbacks in life, even when it feels like that there's an agenda contrary to what you know to be right and truthful? Now, you know that I present these things in a neutral way. I'm not going to take one position or another because I don't want to bias your listening so that you miss these points. I don't want to say one side is right and one side is wrong because it's not subjective. There are universal truths, but I don't want to distract you from these key insights because this self-assessment, this review of what your beliefs are is going to help you do the right thing, even if it turns out to not be in your advantage. Because ultimately, doing the right thing and having congruency in your behavior from a strategic relationships perspective always works out in your favor. So for example, if you're in an organization who's doing naughty things and you stand up against the naughty things, you will be seen by people who probably left the organization and they're out working someplace else, who will then extend opportunities because they know you're trustworthy, they know that you're loyal in a healthy way, and that know you have good ethic. And so this is very powerful. So number one, we want to make sure that we have a clear sense of our own direction and a focus on a purpose. So if you are willy-nilly about what you are and what you do, and by the way, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, if I haven't said that, but you've probably been listening to the podcast long enough to know me by voice. But you have to have a clear sense of your own direction. Now, you can support the corporate mission, you can support a political party, you can support a movement or a advocacy group, but if you are a cog in their wheel, you're more likely to be influenced by social pressure to do what the group thinks is right, rather than what you know to be true and right in your own heart. Now, one of the things about belief systems is that beliefs, thoughts, become behaviors. Behaviors become habits. So if you, in small areas of your life, are trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, the Boy Scout creed, then you're more likely to have things kind of fall into place because you have a clean and clear foundation. So what is your direction? What is your purpose? Now, this could also be career objectives. Maybe you're in an organization and you have a certain income goal, but it seems like your manager, it seems like the budget, it seems like the economy is completely against your income goal. If you're firm in your income goal, rather than saying, oh, thank you very much for that 1% raise, I'll work harder, I'll be more deserving, you'll say, oh, thank you for the 1% raise, I appreciate your time, and then you'll immediately be looking for another job. You'll find that next opportunity because you are, it's almost like this selfish view of your own outcomes because you're tied into this larger picture rather than the next quarter's goals, the next week's goals. This is a more of a Eastern philosophy than a Western philosophy, but it's, again, what is your path? What is your direction? Number 2, you want to avoid senseless distractions. The enemy is not logical. So anybody who's against your clear plan is going to do so by emotional perspective. So you announce to your family that you want to make $250,000 a year and you want to run your own business, and the family's going to say to you, well, why don't you go get a real job? You know, it's unrealistic to want to make $250,000 a year. Nobody in our family has ever made $250,000 a year. In fact, the only way to make $250,000 a year is to do something unethical. Okay, now if you explore this with them, they'll just get angry at you because they're saying this because they've never made $250,000 a year. They don't know anybody who's made $250,000 a year. They don't know anybody who's ever been a manager. They've always worked at the factory, and they've always hated management. They've always been a part of a union, and they've always hated management. Nothing wrong with the union necessarily. There's nothing wrong with the management necessarily. These are all perspectives. But you have to avoid these senseless distractions because they are not you. If you want to make $250,000 a year and you want to be the manager, it's more important your reasons why than it is the reasons why other people think you can't. Okay, very often you may have less confidence in yourself than some of the people around you, but when you share your go-up goals, so as Zig Ziglar talked about, your grow-up goals, your going-up goals, that makes other people fearful. They're afraid that if you're successful, you're not going to want to hang out with them anymore. You know, there's some social dynamics here. So again, avoid the senseless distractions. Now, these senseless distractions could be media that's telling you that you're not worthy, that you're not good enough, that you're a victim, that you're somebody who's been oppressed over all these years, and therefore you have to struggle. Well, what if there are people that are just like you that haven't struggled? Wouldn't it be more advantageous to you to go read a biography about somebody who's overcome obstacles than to hear about all the people that are impacted by obstacles? It's accurate thinking from the Napoleon Hill. You have to be able to put aside frivolous things and focus on what matters. Number 3 is carefully evaluate. Remember, carefully evaluate decisions on a 100-year business or versus the current thing. So you want to say, if what I'm doing today, will it serve my family for years to come? Will it be a blessing to my children? Will it serve my business and create a legacy rather than just, whatever the latest thing is? Are we helping humanity? Now, these are things bigger than you are in the sense that they will motivate you, that they will focus you. Now, we have to be careful. These are balanced decisions because some things can turn out pretty bad. Again, this is why I don't give you specific examples left or right. I want to keep it nice and central because you can make a decision. You're an adult. What is that thing that you can be proud of? And so when you make a decision, you carefully evaluate. Now, you don't want to take too long evaluating decisions because very much so is if your systems are straight, if your direction is straight, if you are been avoiding distractions, you're going to know the right decision. But is it a long-term decision or is it a short-term need? The short-term needs could be cutting corners a little bit on the quality of a product so that you can hit your numbers this quarter, but you create a potential risk in the future because the product quality now could fail on a customer, that kind of thing. Number 4, you want to understand your enemy may be a tool of a larger enemy. So when we talk about in the True Believer, Eric Hoffer talks about you can motivate people by establishing an enemy. So some political group comes along and says, that man is the enemy. He is the president right now, but he's trying to destroy this country, and he's going to bring in fascism. Okay, it doesn't matter who they're saying this about. All throughout history, it doesn't matter who's president. That has been said. But is it that specific person who is the, quote, enemy, or is it a larger system that either promoted the person or is claiming, by putting upon that person the label, is actually claiming someone else is the enemy when they're actually the enemy? So you have to know who is your enemy. You have to know what motivates them. You have to know why. Now, again, in a day-to-day work environment, this enemy could be a manager who's a little jealous that you're better at your job than them, and they feel incompetent because they know that they don't deserve the job, or they only got hired because they're friends with somebody else, and now they're kind of out to get you. That really does happen in the corporate psychology or the corporate culture. So you also have to know why, what motivates them. So a boss that's being mean to you could have an enemy that is their feelings about themselves. Maybe they're a little narcissistic and they're beating up themselves and they want to take it out on somebody. Maybe your manager's a little bit aggressive and they are perceived by you as an enemy because they're trying to hit numbers because they know things you don't know, and they know that if you hit these numbers that everybody wins. Or they know if you hit these numbers, they win. You've got to know these things. Now, again, I always recommend journaling to discover these things, to kind of get your challenges in writing and to work your way through them. But again, these are thinking exercises that help you prepare you to overcome someone else's agenda that's imposed upon you. Number 5, and we're going to wrap up with number 5 here. You want to actively counsel on truth and your long-held beliefs. This is very important. You want to maintain these beliefs with facts, understanding, study, and quality counsel. So if you're in a situation where you believe something that is negative, you believe that your boss is out to get you, okay? You need to go talk with somebody who can objectively help you review the situation to see whether or not the boss is really out to get you. Because if they are not out to get you, but we're perceiving negative behavior that has nothing to do with you as a personal attack, that's more about the way you see yourself than that boss. And if you move to a new job, you might get a new boss that hates you, and it might not be anything to do with the boss. It could do more with your perception. But there are other cases where something bad is actually happening. Let's say the inflation. The government says the inflation is 3%. They'd like to bring it down to 2%, but you're seeing your grocery prices double every couple of months. Well, that could be that you're buying things you don't need to be buying, or it could be the inflation rate in general is 3%, but the food and housing and healthcare and college expenses that are associated with things that you're going to have an immediate need for are going up 25%. And so the way they're calculating is not right. You have to understand some basic economics in order to challenge that long-held belief. A lot of times people say, well, you know what? It's the Democrats that make the inflation go up. And then they say it's the Republicans that make the inflation go up. Well, how do you know? You got to challenge those beliefs with active, accurate, and truthful counsel. Now, there's ways to interact with counsel to make sure. But again, you go to a lawyer when you have questions about legal issues. You go to an economist when you have questions about the economy. And you go to a strategist when you have things about strategy. So this is what I'm going to leave you with. I've covered 5 key elements to help you fight their agenda. On my particular notes here, I've got at least 6 more. If you'd like me to cover this topic in more detail, then you're going to visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. You're going to go to the contact page. You're going to ask your question. This is titled Fight Their Agenda. If you want to work specifically on an issue in your point, because a lot of times my clients have corporate and competitive challenges. So I worked with one client. It was a senior executive who hired me. They put me on a team because that team was about to lose a $25 million contract. My job was to deliver technical performance, but to also improve communications, efficiency, because I have experience in business process optimization, and then also to kind of suss out what the underlying problems were. What I discovered is that there were a couple toxic managers, and those toxic managers were doing things that were inappropriate, but they were getting sanctioned for their toxic behavior from a client leadership person. So there was an even more toxic program manager. So I suss these things out, I report on them, I help fix the problems, I make suggestions. That is a strategic thing that I've done for corporations. I've done it in the risk management perspective, doing risk self-assessments. And I've also done it for individuals that are doing strategic buyouts, consolidation, joint venture. I worked with a number of venture capitalists. If these topics, if you feel like that there's an agenda against you, that somebody on the outside is trying to stifle your growth, to impact your success, to limit your influence, then we can address that individually with a paid consultation. So you go to www.insidestrategicrelations.com, go to the contact page, and ask about these things. So it's the clear sense of your own direction. We have programs to help you get that clear sense. It's avoid senseless distractions. If you're not using this podcast, it is a senseless distraction because I'm revealing things that happen behind the scenes with human behavior, with psychology, with sociology, with how strategic relationships work that could be a distraction. You don't want to be distracted by this. You want to carefully evaluate your decisions. So if you are facing a challenge and it is worth investing in solving a problem, that's a little bit more engagement than just curiosity to answer a question. You decide. Number 4 is you want to understand your enemy. I do a lot of strategic reports because your enemy might not be an actual person. It could be a social condition or a change in society that we'll go and I'll hire the experts for you and I'll manage the team and we'll do a report on that. But again, I can teach you how to do it yourself. And number 5, the active counsel. I hope this podcast has been good counsel in your ear to help you really understand that you don't have to get steamrolled. You don't have to get beat down. You don't have to have all these obstacles and frictions. There are real enemies to your belief system out there, but again, you don't necessarily have to fight them. You can have a stronger system of belief that brings on followers, that brings on supporters, that builds allies, that ultimately overcomes these challenges. If you want to hear more on this particular topic, like I said, my notes here have a couple more keys. I don't have my program code here. This was something I was working on after a client consultation. But it really ties into the private benefit organization. I want to leave you with this last tip, is that when there's an agenda against your position, it is always best to organize. It allows you to consolidate resources, to build social structure, to build support networks, and to implement these particular cases, not as an independent person in an island, but as someone who's part of a community. And then as a part of that community, you can get the support that you need. So again, if you visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com, you can ask your questions about this or anything that we cover here on the podcast. I would love you to join us on our email newsletter or become a supporting member and get additional coaching calls and deep dives and group discussions, because this is the executive level strategy that helps you transform business relationships into profits. Not just financial profits, but profits that make you feel good about life, profits that make you connect with the right people, profits that cause opportunity to come to you. I want to thank you for being a part of our podcast. And no matter where you're listening to this podcast, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to go this far. Like and subscribe, but more importantly, visit the website with your questions. And I look forward to serving you in the future.